Okay, sorry to delay some things because I had to get stuff up on the satellite because this airs tomorrow, but there were some things that I wanted to talk about while y'all were here that I think is really important. You and I have talked about before, Clint, and you have advocated for what you call a one-strike law.
Absolutely.
Talk about what you mean about that and how it would affect a situation like Chelsea King or like the Alcala case.
Yeah, look, Dr. Phil has explained to us today these two cases. All of us up here can tell you about dozens, if not hundreds of cases of where sexual predators are out in the street and they are continuing to reoffend. They think the system is a joke. They think you and I are laughable. And what we're doing is every time we put these guys back on the street again, we're saying that your son or your daughter or your grandchild is now a likely victim. They're out there, this person who's stalking, who's looking. And Phil, it just makes me so angry. I mean, I don't care about somebody smoking pot. I don't care about somebody stealing a car. If we want to do something in this country, we need a one-strike law. We need to say, if you offend against a child, a woman, a man in a violent sexual manner, you're going to jail, and you are not going to get out of that jail, and that's what this country needs.
And what does that do to our system? If we do that, can we house these offenders? What does it do? Because it makes sense to me. There are certain people that are brutal and vicious that, to me, I know there is nothing. I've been in this profession for over 30 years now. I got a bachelor's degree, master's degree, PhD degree, and postdoctoral training in forensic psychology and the law. And I can tell you there is not one thing that I have to offer a Rodney Alcala. There's not one thing I have to offer that I could look you in the eye and say, this man is safe to be back out on the street. I'm sorry. I don't have a protocol. I don't have a treatment protocol. You can talk about castrating people. You can talk about chemical castration. You can talk about every manner of cognitive therapy, desensitization, all sorts of things. There's nothing that I could tell you in good conscience, this person is safe to be back out on the street. There's just nothing to offer. So that's why I say, and Robert, you say, and no offense to what Nathan is suggesting, because I think he's suggesting some good things, but you say some of these little cutesy name laws don't really do it for you.
Well, like you said, I don't mean to offend people, but we've got to quit what I call the Band-Aid laws. The Megan law did no good for Chelsea King. Jessica's law did nothing good for Chelsea King. Those are my Band-Aid laws. We're trying to cover up our problem where the problem is in, let's just one strike them and lock them away. There's no redeeming factor. We should not, as people, have to check our neighbors to see that they're sexual predators. Really now?
And there are a lot of people that suggest that we monitor these people too closely and that we restrict them too closely, that if you require them to register and be somewhere, they will be driven out of their neighborhoods, and then they become unstable, and they become disenfranchised, and that's the very thing that contributes to their offending to begin with. I think that's insane. If there is a sexual offender out there, particularly a violent sexual offender out there, I want to know where that person is. I want to have the ability to find out where that person is. I mean, Tony, what do you need as a prosecutor?
Well, I agree that the violent sexual offender, it should be a one strike. And I think we need to be careful with how we say that, because not just life in prison, because life in prison, for example, in California, you can get out in 7 or 8 or 10 years. It needs to be life in prison without possibility of parole, because there's no way... There's simply no way that these people can be rehabilitated. And I'll tell you what, assume that maybe 1 or 2 of these guys could get rehabilitated. Why should we take the risk? Once they've done all of those terrible things, why take any risk? And then another thing is that people need to do the time that they're given. If somebody gets a 10-year sentence, they ought to do 10 years. They shouldn't do 5 years because of good time, work time, and all these different things. So they need to do the time. And another thing I think really important that we don't really have a lot of here in California, there ought to be personal accountability for the people who make these decisions to let these guys out. They ought to be personally accountable. We ought to know who they are, what they considered, why they released somebody, and they should be held up to the public as having done that.
See, what I'm wondering is is what the decision-making process was in letting this person go after what he did with you, Talia. Because here's what we know: there are certain factors from a psychological standpoint that tell you somebody is a risk. For example, if they were removed from their home before 16 years of age, they're higher risk to be violent and to reoffend. If they have a particular perversion, they're higher risk to reoffend. If they have a violent history, a criminal history, they're more likely. There are so many things that you can add up that tell you this is a high-risk person for reoffending. And as I say, the research is all over the board about how likely they are to reoffend, but it depends. Are you talking about arrest? Are you talking about convictions? They have so many victims that you don't know about. Now, we have a timeline of Rodney Alcala that I would like to look at because I want people to get this. I didn't get this until we built this timeline. So let's have a look at this if we can. Okay, in '68, this horrible event takes place with you, Tali. Then from '68 to '71, he's a fugitive. He's out there probably offending. Okay, next. Okay, '71, Cornelia Crilly. This is in New York. This guy is allowed to move from California to New York where he's not on the radar. He goes to New York where he's not in the system. He was never convicted of this, but he was tied to it, the death of Cornelia Crilly. Okay, then from '72 to '74, he spends half of a 34-month sentence for what he did to you. Okay, next. Okay, '74, 2 months after he's released from those 17 months in prison, he gets a 13-year-old girl. He's giving her marijuana and taking her away. So they say, well, we're not going to prosecute him for kidnapping or even for the contribution to delinquency to a minor. We'll just violate his probation. So he gets 24 months. Okay, then he gets out, and here's what happens. This guy should not, from the time he laid a hand on you, he should have been gone for 30 years, okay? But he's not. So what happens is Crilly and then this 13-year-old, now he's out, and in '77, Jane Hover in New York City, murdered. They couldn't link the body because DNA was not there. He was the main suspect there. Okay, next. Then your sister falls victim in '77, raped, beaten, strangled. He's not convicted till 2010. He's not convicted for, over 30 years. Then Georgia Wixted. Okay, now, in this situation, he rapes a woman with a hammer. Then he takes the hammer and beats her head in and kills her. Okay, this is a guy that served 17 months for what he did to you. Okay, then, in 1978, he goes on the dating game. He's bachelor number 1. He wins. He wins, but she won't go out with him. No, after the show, she said, no. This is a woman that spent 20 minutes with him and said, I think I'll pass. Think I'll pass. '78, Charlotte Lamb, bludgeoned and strangled. Monique Hoyt, she was raped, but she escaped. He's arrested, $10,000 post bail. Next. Jill Parenteau, raped, strangled, blood found at the scene, charge and case dismissed. And they said they didn't need to go forward because of what happened with Robin. And then Robin, kidnapped, raped, murdered. He's now in his